everyone, I'm Jewel Owusu. I wanted to jump on here and have a quick chat about my music journey because I'm a music artist, still a very small artist, and in no way an expert or anything, but I have been getting a few questions on Instagram and TikTok about my journey as an independent artist and how I made a start in it. So yeah, I thought I'd get on here and chat and give some tips and advice and just talk about my journey. First, I'm going to give a bit of background about myself, and then I'm going to chat about things for people just making their very first start in music, very basic things. So feel free to skip over that if you kind of already know what you're doing. And then later I'm gonna give some marketing tips and answer some specific questions that I've received on Instagram and TikTok, just a few of them. So I make alternative pop music. This is kind of what my music sounds like. About me. I was born in Hong Kong and then moved to New Zealand, and that is when I started getting interested in music. I started by doing musical theater as a really little kid. I'm very, very lucky that my parents got me into music stuff very early. I kind of started singing more after we had this concert in New Zealand and there were auditions for these solo parts, and I auditioned for one of the parts and I actually got it. Then after that, I kind of just casually sung. It wasn't until way later, I guess in high school, I was still very interested in music, but I didn't know if singing was the thing that I wanted to do. And I thought maybe I'll just focus on piano, and then I started playing the saxophone. So I kind of bounced between lots of instruments. I kept coming back to singing, and I was like, you know what? I loved writing. I was always writing stories and I was always writing poems and stuff. So I was like, I like singing, I like writing, maybe I could start writing some songs. But I always saw it as a hobby and I never saw it as something that I was ever good enough to take seriously. So yeah, when I went to uni, I started studying fashion. Amongst all of this, I was just making music in my room. And then one of my friends started producing, and then we just kind of started working together and making our first songs together. I just decided why not put these out on streaming platforms. That's kind of how I made my start. My sounds definitely evolved a lot. I definitely started off making lo-fi music, R&B, lo-fi influence kind of stuff. At the time I was I feel this is just what people want to hear rather than what I actually wanted to make. But I've always really been into pop music. I've always really been into electronic music. When I was young, loved very early 2000s punk rock and EDM as well. I feel my sound now is a mix of everything I've loved. It's very indie pop, but with lots of hyper-pop, electronic, dance, and even rocky influences. And yeah, the biggest two questions that I've received is how to actually get started and release music, and what advice I'd give to someone starting out. So if you're I don't even know how to start making a song, there are many ways to start. If you're someone who just sings and wants to write songs, but you don't know how to produce them, there are lots of ways you can go about this. I would recommend though downloading BandLab or GarageBand on your phone and just try playing around with some of the tools there. Just try making things for yourself and then recording your own voice into the phone. And if you can't play an instrument and you're really struggling, just use your voice as a synth, hear it out in your head and sing it out, and just put effects on it until it sounds like a piano or a synth or something, because I think it's really great to use the skills that you do have. Or if you're really stumped, you can use YouTube beats. Just search up instrumental that sounds like this. I would recommend only using it to write demos too, and not trying to release the beat itself, but maybe use it as a writing tool and then find a producer that can create a similar sound and then show them what you've made. Big thing, if you're not trying to produce yourself, find producers to work with. A producer is someone who puts all the pieces together, makes the music. How to find a producer, I'd recommend using a platform called SoundBetter. There's lots of platforms similar to this, but it's where industry professionals can kind of advertise their services and people looking for those services can find it. Or another good one is look for your favorite small artists and go on the credits and see who they're working with. But yeah, definitely start with some demos, definitely start writing with what you have. Obviously with your demos you can start recording just on your phone, just with your voice memos app, but when you actually need to record the song, I would invest in a basic condenser mic. A huge one that beginners start with is the Rode NT1 or the Rode NT1A. Probably the cheapest industry standard kind of microphones. You'll need an interface to actually record the sound. This is what an interface is. Lots of people start with the Scarlett Focusrite 2i2. That's what I started with and I still use it to this day. I think it's really great. So I highly recommend learning to record your own vocals because making music is already so expensive, and then on top of that, having to go to a studio every time you want to record something isn't ideal in my opinion. It's more ideal to just invest a few $100s into a basic setup and learning to record yourself than going to a studio. But I know some people do not have the luxury of recording at home. So if you need to, there's a lot of studios that accommodate for beginners and have packages. Another thing I've seen recently is there's a lot of local libraries that have studios that you can record at, and usually they offer really cheap rates. A lot of them have really good gear. It's not a thing in like every city, but I know I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I know there's a couple libraries that have recording equipment. After that, when you've recorded your song, when you have a produced song that you like, you'll need to do something called mixing. You don't have to do it, but you need to get someone to mix your song unless you want to learn how to mix it. It's something that definitely takes a while to learn, but it's a really great skill to have. I don't know how to mix, but this is essentially where a mix engineer balances all the elements of your song, the vocals, the instrumental, the effects, everything, and makes it sound polished and into a clean song. Some producers include mixing in their services, but you can also hire a separate mix engineer. I do recommend finding someone separate than the person that produced the song to mix it, because it's always good getting like a second perspective and opinion. Sometimes producers have been working on that song for so long that they can't hear what sounds best for the song because they're just too close to it. I also recommend Sound Better, or the same thing, like look at the credits of songs that you love from small local artists and see who mixed them. I would also recommend getting good at hearing like what is a clean mix and what is a bad mix. There's heaps of tutorials that would help you learn like what mixing is and learn what a good mix is and a bad mix is. I'd say mixing can really make or break a song. After this, you'll need to do something called mastering. It involves like setting the loudness to an industry standard and then also a bit of further balancing and equalizing. So once again, sometimes producers, mixers, mix engineers also will master the song. If you are on a budget, there's a lot of like plugins and free sites like Lander that you can use to just get your song sounding like mastered. Obviously, I definitely recommend getting a mastering engineer if you can. And once you've got your song mastered, I definitely recommend this site called loudnesspenalty.com. It is basically where you can upload your file and see what it sounds like across all the streaming platforms. So like Spotify, YouTube, because these platforms will turn down the audio and they all turn it down by like different decibels. So this is kind of like what it takes to make a song. The most important thing I would say is when you're starting out, get comfortable, ask for honest feedback, and get friends that will be very brutal with you. That is if you are like trying to take like music seriously. But also remember that when you're just starting out, the art does not need to be perfect for it to be released. Like the more you make music, the more you release, the better you'll start getting, and I guess the more you'll grow. So just make heaps of music and enjoy making it as well. After you've made your song, you will need a few other things if you want to release the song. You'll need an artwork for the song and you'll need press photos. So I'd recommend for like press photos just buying like a disposable camera, or even just taking iPhone photos and using like an editing software to make them look really good. In terms of the artwork, I make all my artworks and I do all my graphics and everything, and I like to put Pinterest boards together of like how I want everything to look, and then I just mess around in Photoshop and Illustrator until I have something that I really like. And I definitely try to stick to a theme throughout my release cycle. I feel like getting visual branding right, it's a very hard thing to master and it's hard to be consistent, but that's another thing that comes like as you go along. You'll find a visual identity that you resonate with more. So yeah, press photos and artwork, absolutely needed. Okay, now I'm going to talk about getting your music on streaming platforms. I would say besides finding a distributor, the rest of what I'm going to say from here on out is more relevant for those who want to take their music like really seriously and maybe even try turn it into a business. So now you have the song, you have the artwork, you're happy with everything. First thing you need to do is find a distributor. A distributor is someone that will essentially take your song and put it on all the platforms that it needs to be on. I always recommended finding a smaller like independent digital distributor rather than the major ones. The major ones are like the DistroKids, the CD Babies. Obviously still good and great for people just starting out because they're quite cheap, but there are heaps of smaller ones that kind of provide like boutique label services. I guess what distributor suits you best will definitely also differ per country and what markets you're in and per genre. But let me know in the comments if you want some recommendations. I can definitely recommend a few. It's very easy once you find them. You just upload your music, upload the artwork. But I guess after this, then it's time to start thinking about promotional efforts. Biggest piece of advice is find a release checklist. Just search out release checklist 2025 or like independent artist release schedule release checklist. There are so many on Google. Find one and just tick off every single thing on the list. Usually these checklists start from like 6 weeks out or like 4 weeks out from when the song's going to be released. And they just have so many things that small artists and people starting out wouldn't even think of doing. Things like registering your track with like performing organizations. Like I'm in Australia, so this is APRA. Things like about submitting your music to playlists, creating content, like posting schedules, sending press emails, like so many things. But if you tick off every item, you're already doing things like right. In terms of marketing and PR for beginners, lots of people pay for like PR for their song. But if I were an artist just starting out and say I were releasing like 5 singles in a year, I would pick 2 of those songs to get paid PR for, and then the rest I'd do myself. What a publicist essentially does is send your song out to press so that you can get coverage on your song, and then sometimes some PR people will do radio coverage for you. Like when I first started, I just sent my song out to like people myself. I just tried to find their contact details on LinkedIn or wherever, and I would just send my song out and find like radio presenters emails. Make the emails sound personal, of course, because it's annoying getting spam emails, and these people receive so many emails a day. But yeah, music publications, they're not the place that people go to find songs like they used to, which is really sad. So investing a lot of money in these kind of campaigns is not the smartest move in my opinion. I guess if I were to talk marketing stuff, this would be a 10-hour video because I have so much to say. I also studied marketing and I definitely come to love the marketing side of things. I definitely started off hating it and hating content and hating having to do that. But as time goes on and as I got used to it, I've started to like really enjoy the thinking behind it. If I were to give some basic like marketing tips for independent artists, I have a few. I'm sure you've heard a lot about content. I'm sure you've complained a lot about content or heard people complaining about content, but it is still such an essential thing for releasing music. It actually is something that really levels the playing field because, you know, back in the day, people really had to pay to play, but now anyone can get in, anyone can just like create content and have people discover them. It can definitely get very tiring, especially if you're an artist. Your like content is not something that comes to your mind first. What helps me kind of create content is batching content in advance, planning maybe like a month's worth of posts and having like a content calendar. Spend one day creating like 20 videos or something in the single day, like maybe just change your outfit, and then you have like 2 months worth of things to post and it only took a few hours of one day. Casual content is what works best, just being like really authentic, being yourself. I don't think at the start you really need to invest in really high quality videos because it's just too expensive. And a huge thing that I will say is I think artists need to post online as if no one knows who they are, because most people don't. I see a lot of artists that share content that assume the audience already understands their story and their sound or the meaning behind their songs, and I think if you want to reach new listeners, you need to give them a clear reason to care. I think most pieces of content need to offer like real value or emotional connection to someone who's never heard of you, especially at the start. I have definitely like fallen into the trap of relying too heavily on like posting trends in the hopes of building a fan base, and I think that is important to like, you know, see what's trending on TikTok and like post to get like new people on your page, but it's not something that people should rely on too heavily. Next, I would say send your song to playlist curators. Don't just rely on like Spotify playlists. Pitch to indie curators. There's so many places that you can send your song out. Submit Hub, Groover, there's so many places. Maybe even like build a spreadsheet of places that have put your song into playlists before once you start getting into playlists, and then maybe like when you release more songs, like reach out to them again. Or I will say set a budget. Even if it's very small, it can go very far. I'd consider spending $50 to $100 per song on like digital marketing, which is essentially like running ads on your song. There's different types of digital marketing, but I'd say like run Instagram ads. There are a lot of videos online that will teach you the best ways to run ads for your song. Definitely don't just throw money into ads if you don't know how to run them, but there are so many great tutorials online. Last thing I will say is consider a show around a release. I would recommend planning a headline show around one of your releases, but be cautious about doing too many too early. If you don't have an established fan base yet, it'll likely just be friends and family in the room, which is great, but it won't help you grow and can become very stressful trying to sell tickets and everything. But I think one well-planned headline show can be like a very strong piece of social proof, and it shows that you're serious about music and that you're active enough to have enough music that justifies you doing a headline show. And that kind of like momentum of holding your own show can lead to you getting support slots, and it can just increase your credibility. But yes, like I said, I wouldn't try to put on show after show without the demand, because I just don't think that's a very sustainable strategy. But obviously open to hearing other perspectives. If you do disagree with that, let me know. I really do think that if you're making great music and if you're following a release checklist and being consistent with content, being consistent with like releasing a lot, then you will grow. It'll be slow growth, but it'll be growth. I read like a statistic that says there's like 120,000 songs released per day. That's just so many songs. It's just not gonna go anywhere unless you put in the work. I'll finish this part of the video by saying the quicker that you realize that you're not owed listeners and you're not owed a fan base is the quicker you'll start learning to be more self-reflective about the things that you're making. I guess next, I have got asked a few questions on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm gonna answer a few of them. Advice I give to those first releasing, and best advice you give to someone starting up their career. So I guess I kind of have answered this a little bit, but I have two more pieces of advice. First one is learn how to produce a little bit, even if it's just very basic production skills. I've done some production courses as well on like Udemy, and you can learn everything on YouTube, but like learning to produce has really helped me refine my sound. Especially as a woman in the music industry, I feel like learning to produce is so important, because then you'll be able to communicate what you're hearing in your head. The production world is so dominated by men. I think it's so important to be like, no, this is actually what I want, this is how I want it done. And then secondly, I guess I've kind of already said this, but make as much music as you can and just put it out, because you'll quickly discover what you like and what you don't like. Another good thing that you can discover is like what fan base is gonna like your songs. I think a lot of the time the people you think you might appeal to are not actually the people that your music will appeal to. Next, I got asked, how do I start the writing process, melody or lyrics, and do you have to learn an instrument? So I start writing in so many ways. It's changed a lot over the years. I used to start writing all my songs on piano or like on guitar with the very basic skills that I have. Now a lot of my songs I start by like making something, like producing something and then writing over. Or if I'm in a session with someone else, we'll just start making the song together. Usually I will sing melodies in my head and then I'll like try dump lyrics onto a page and then put lyrics to it as fast as I can, even if they're just placeholder lyrics. I don't think you need to learn how to play an instrument to write songs, but it's always good to learn the basics of any instrument if you can, and if you have the time and ability. Next, I got asked my lyric writing technique. I kind of went a bit into that, but another thing that I do is I write poems throughout my days. I write lots of things just in my notes page. Just like little poems and like little one-liners. I'll do that like many times a week in my notes page. Those won't be songs, they'll just be like little poems. And then when it comes time to write a song, I'll just go back to those poems. I'll just see, what have I written? Is there something that I can use for a song? Okay, a couple more questions. I got asked what my creative warm-up is, and this one's a hard one because I feel like I don't really have like a warm-up, but I definitely feel more creative when life is busy. So I work full-time, and when I get home, all I feel like doing is like working on music and doing like creative stuff. And I found in the past that when there's been moments in my life when I've had more free time and I haven't worked as much and I've had more time to actually create music, that's when I don't feel as creative, and that's when I feel less inspired. I feel like having a structure and like a busy schedule really fuels my creativity, because I think the time I spend creating feels more focused and intentional. Maybe it's not a great thing like being so busy all the time, but it's what's working for me right now. And I think there's something good about having like a routine and even doing things that you don't necessarily enjoy doing. Sorry, this is such a tangent, but I think that's why a lot of people connect deeply with so many like famous artists like early work, because that's when they were like balancing real life and responsibilities, and the emotions and the ideas that they were writing about came from like a place of feeling more grounded. But once an artist like makes and their entire life revolves around making music, I feel like sometimes the song can feel a bit less connected from reality and everyday experiences, and in turn like less relatable. So yeah, I think there's ways to like manage that and find inspiration from other places. But for me, like right now in this stage of my life, I've realized that my inspiration doesn't come from like trying to find it, but rather it kind of shows up when like life is just happening around me and my routine's happening. I'm not really sure if that answers the creative warm-up question, but that is how I feel creative. I got asked one thing I wish I knew when I started. I guess another thing I could add, this is more of a production thing, but one thing I wish I knew earlier was that less is more. When I was new to making music, I always thought the more stems, the more complex a song is gonna sound. And it took me a while to realize that like less elements that are stronger will actually result in cleaner songs. Someone asked, moving interstate, what's the journey been like? So if you don't know, I used to live in the west coast of Australia. I moved there from New Zealand when I was in high school, and now I live on the east coast of Australia in a place called Melbourne. I live somewhere called Perth, which is like one of the most like isolated cities in the world. I moved to the east coast of Australia about 3 years ago. I am loving it so much. I think that for me, smaller cities have never really been the place for me. I find more excitement and fulfillment from like living in a bigger city and having like a bit of busier life. I do think that there are definitely benefits to like living in a small city, especially if you're in a creative career. Especially in music, I think that like there's like less people to compete with. Not that it's a competition, but you can kind of have like a monopoly on all the opportunities if you're like the one person doing something really well in your genre or your sound. If you're in a small city and like one big artist comes, there's more chance that you'll get the opportunity to open for them. Moving out of a small city, it's definitely a privilege, but if it's something that you have the privilege and opportunity to do, 100% do it. I've personally found that I've grown so much, and I do think that if you have the drive and motivation, you can make it from anywhere. No matter where you are, it's what's inside that's gonna like push you to like succeed. For me and my mental health, like getting out of like a small town, well, small cities has just like exponentially improved my mental health and just made me more excited about creating and doing shows and everything. But yeah, that's all the questions that I'm gonna answer today. Thank you so much to anyone who asked me a question. It's just so cool that I even get to make this video and answer questions that people have had for me. If you do like want to know more, let me know in the comments. I'm very happy to answer any more questions. I'm definitely planning on making more YouTube videos, so feel free to subscribe and I'll see you soon.